Many of us were born into the world finding out about the United Nations. In fact, some of you might have been around when the United Nations was started or launched in 1945, but I wasn't, and many of our viewers weren't. We just kind of got to know about the United Nations as we became aware of life and politics and these bodies. Tell us what the primary purpose of the UN was set up for.
Well, as you know, Rory and Wendy, the UN, the primary purpose of the UN is one world government. It was created specifically for one agenda, to bring about a world government and a world economic system. Any other thing that the United Nations does, and they do some good things, like feeding the poor and distributing medicine, etc., but their primary agenda is to establish a one world or global government.
But Paul, how did you come to that conclusion? How did you said, we were talking earlier and you said that you'd been a real skeptic about all these matters, the globalization, the New World Order. Just tell us a little bit about your journey.
Sure. First of all, in my college days, I'm a radical from the counterculture, hair down to my waist. I wanted to see a one world government. I wanted to see a peaceful revolution. Very liberal. And so I was sympathetic to the goals of the United Nations, but I'm a skeptic by nature. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't believe in black helicopters. I doubt just about everything I read before I read it, including the Bible. I doubted the Bible. And I kept hearing that, well, the United Nations was formed for the purpose of one world government. That sounded so conspiratorial. I couldn't believe it. But as I began to research the original documents of the United Nations by its founders, as I began to research the...
Who founded it?
Well,
who founded
yes, as you know, the United Nations was founded by some very powerful banking interests, the Rockefellers as one. The League of Nations around 1917 was its predecessor. It was a combined operation of a think tank between the Royal Institute of International Affairs in Great Britain and the Council on Foreign Relations. And interestingly enough, and again I approach this with so much skepticism, there were agents, communist agents, and I know that sounds conspiratorial, Alger Hiss and others, who were right there at the foundation of the United Nations. So it was a combined effort of very wealthy interests, Soviet agents, but where it originally stemmed from was Great Britain. Intellectuals, the Fabian socialists, H.G. Wells, the great science fiction writer, War of the Worlds, The Invisible Man, George Bernard Shaw, and others. These intellectuals who were socialists, they were communists, they believed that all of mankind's problems could be solved by a global government. They had the attraction of powerful industrialists, and the next thing you know, the train was rolling along towards a global government. So it was started in the minds of British intellectuals, but it now has come to birth.
But let's take it even further than that, because it's very good to just anchor this program that we fight not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers.
That's right.
So speak of that a little bit.
Okay. In Genesis, we read the story of Babylon, the Tower of Babel. And, you know, as I often say to classes, you know, God didn't write the story of Babel and the Tower of Babel because he was bored. He was trying to give mankind a message that global government is evil. Nimrod was a prototype of the Antichrist. Well, why did God judge the Tower of Babel? Why did he confuse the languages of the world? The reason he did that, and as you know, the Tower of Babel was an astrological, occult worship tower. It was an occultic system, and it was an occultic world government. God could see in the hearts of mankind, and he said, anything they purposed to do, they'll be able to do. He judged it because he knew that in their hearts they wanted to be like God. It was satanic. It was Luciferian. So the idea of global government, as you were just saying, Rory, is Luciferian in nature. One world government, or the global government, essentially is a counterfeit of the new heaven and the new earth and the new world that God's going to bring about. But it will be one world under man, or Antichrist, versus one new world under Christ and the new heaven and the new earth.
Okay. So can I take you back a little bit before the United Nations to 1776?
Okay.
And can I ask you, do you believe in things like the Illuminati?
That, you know,
And the New World Order?
Yes, and I get chills when you say that, because I was so resistant to even going into the area of the Illuminati, because that's conspiracy theory stuff.
I was too, I know.
And so I was close to it. But here we are in Washington, D.C.
With the streets mapped out.
Yes, with the street, and I'm flying in, and I see the great pyramid eye,
Yep.
and I see the Masonic architecture, and the architecture of the Illuminati in the layout of the nation's capital.
The very streets of the capital.
Yes,
Yeah.
as I'm flying down on it, thinking about doing this program. And then I'm laughing because it's tragic. I think of the dollar bill, which of course is in tremendous trouble right now. America was a Christian nation, great Christians, but there were also, at the founding of America, Luciferians, the Illuminati, the Masons were very much involved. And for anyone who would doubt that, they would merely need to do is pull out a dollar bill and see the pyramid on the back of the dollar bill with the Luciferian all-seeing eye. Now, what is the eye of Lucifer? What is it doing on the currency of a Christian nation with a pyramid, which is an occultic system? And then the words, of course, in Latin, New World Order.
Correct. New World Order.
Yes.
That's right.
I mean,
Say
Tell
that.
us,
No,
if
say that
I'm-
again.
if
No,
I'm-
Say that.
I think it's Novus Ordo Seclorum.
yes.
But let me ask you, Paul, if I'm a viewer now at home, I'm saying, well, Paul, tell me, what is this on the dollar bill? How did it come to be there like that?
The Masons put it on there. And, you know, it became very unfashionable to say New World Order around the time of George Bush Sr. So they stopped saying it. They're very clever at changing the names.
Who's very clever?
Let's just get down to it. The shadow government behind the government.
Thank you. Exactly. Okay.
Okay.
And let me ask you another
Yes.
provocative question. Do you really believe that there is a shadow government behind the government today?
Yes, not only do I believe that there's a shadow government behind the government, I know there's a shadow government behind the government, and there's a throne behind the throne, both earthly and supernatural.
And can I just say to our viewers that Rory and I also, after all the research that we've done, this is why Paul has been invited onto the program, because we believe this too.
You have opened up Pandora's box. We are now.
We're meant to.
we now.
That's why we're doing
we
this.
now have much to discuss.